No, you did scare me. Valiant effort. Valiant effort, though. You tried.
Is my Rubik's Cube scary?
No, your Rubik's Cube is not scary.
I just assumed you'd be easily frightened with that Resident Evil book.
Oh, no, not at all.
I thought all the Resident Evil games were scary.
All of them? Oh, all of them? No. No, not at all.
Well, we might as well start this off by being blunt. Resident Evil 6 is almost universally hated by fans of the series. The Resident Evil series is known for its memorable locations, characters, and creatures, terrifying environments, and intense survival horror gameplay. While at first the series was a slow, toned-back experience with fixed camera angles, Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005. It was a third-person survival horror action-adventure game that had you shoot less zombie-like creatures. Even considering how much it had changed the RE formula, it remains one of the best games of all time and one of my favorite games ever made. Then in 2009 we received Resident Evil 5 that took number 4's established gameplay formula and cranked up the action. At this point, fans were worried that the series was strayed too far away from its roots. But in early 2012, we received Resident Evil Revelations, which proved that the series' new gameplay mechanics blend well with the original Resident Evil slow-paced and thought-out scenarios. In that same year, we also got the next main entry, Resident
Evil 6.
This is gonna get annoying. Resident Evil 6 is essentially a Hollywood blockbuster full of intense over-the-top action sequences with Resident Evil characters and creatures. Fans absolutely hated this game as it didn't even feel or look like the Resident Evil they remembered, and critics were split right down the middle. And even considering how completely different this entry is compared to the rest of the series, Resident Evil 6 is a good game, even coming from a huge fan of the series such as myself. Whether you're a fan of the series or you've never played a Resident Evil game before, you might find something here worth checking out. And before we continue, this is the next-gen version of the game instead of the one for PS3 and Xbox 360, which was just released this year on the 29th of March for only $25. And luckily, Capcom is also porting Resident Evil 4 and 5 to next-gen systems sometime soon. However, they're doing something incredibly stupid. They're releasing the games backwards. We just received the 6th game, we're gonna get the 5th one this summer, and then the 4th one this fall. I know, terrible. So, it looks like I'm going to be reviewing these games backwards, which is going to be weird, especially if you're new to the Resident Evil series, but this should be exciting. Resident Evil 6 has the ambitious idea of tackling 4 different campaigns that all eventually come together to tell one big story. Basically, a new virus has been unleashed around the world, and this time it's called the C virus. This is an airborne virus that turns people into zombies similar to the original RE games, but much faster and a tad more intelligent. And you also have people injecting themselves with this virus to turn into creatures the game calls Joavo, and they have the ability to mutate specific parts of the body upon injury. Taking place in America, a fictional part of Europe, and China, it's up to all the characters you play as to basically save the world and figure out what is going on. While the plot is as B-movie and nonsensical as the rest of the series, it plays out in some entertaining ways, and the game's mysteries are fairly interesting and contain mostly satisfying payoffs. While there are many moments that either make no sense or moments that are pretty unbelievable, it's your typical Resident Evil story, just set on a larger scale. What makes the story interesting are the 4 different campaigns, and they all intersect at multiple parts throughout the story, and you could go through these in almost any way you like. The first campaign has fan favorite Leon S. Kennedy from Resident Evil 2 and 4, alongside newcomer Helena Harper, who reminds me more of a held-back version of Robin from How I Met Your Mother. The second campaign has Chris Redfield from number 1 and 5, alongside new character Pierce Nivens. The third campaign has Sherry Birkin from Resident Evil 2, and newcomer Jake Mueller, who was played by Troy Baker, and the final campaign has the infamously mysterious Ada Wong. All returning characters are actually much more interesting than they've ever been in the whole series. Leon is wiser and more confident in his actions, Chris has reached a point in his life where he has to drink to forget the nightmares he went through, and Cherry Birkin is now grown up, but man has her life been rough. But as a pleasant surprise, Agent Hunnigan is back to assist Leon alongside his journey. The new characters are great too, especially Pierce, who keeps Chris in line, as well as Jake, but for spoiler reasons, I won't say why he's so awesome. Even when the story gets messed up and when the script is corny, the Resident Evil series still manages to have you care for its characters and their relationships, and Resident Evil 6 is no exception. Visually, this game looks great, with its impressive graphics and top-of-the-line cinematic presentation. Because of the game's big production value, the game's huge scale is almost jaw-dropping at times. Character models and animations are convincing, the lighting is good, and the amount of detail in the environment is remarkable, with locations such as downtown China and an American university standing out. However, there are just as many locations that feel uninspired and boring, such as the cathedral, whatever the hell's underneath it, and just being outside in the snow. There are also many moments where the developers took incredibly lazy shortcuts, like certain buildings looking like 2D cutouts. But even during the most lackluster moments, Resident Evil 6's presentation is well done and complements the game's controversial new take on the series. Resident Evil 6 is much more streamlined and accessible compared to other entries in the series. Gone are the complicated inventory systems, ability to save at specific moments, or the merchants where you can purchase and upgrade weapons. You just play the game and upgrade certain skills along the way. While this does sound like a step backwards, considering the multiple campaigns, having a system as streamlined as this is much more convenient. While the game plays similar to the recent RE games, it feels completely different. In almost every single Resident Evil game, you control your character in such a stiff manner, but you always felt like you had control over your actions. In number 6, it's almost the complete opposite. All of the characters are super loose, to the point where the simple act of walking around becomes fairly inaccurate. I got stuck during the heat of the moment multiple times, and casually running in small corridors just looks so weird. You can also take cover when fighting against enemies with ranged weapons, but it's a hassle just to get into cover. But luckily, there are many benefits to being so loosey-goosey. You can now walk and aim at the same time. It's revolutionary! You can also slide around, roll on the ground, and do some crazy melee moves on your enemies. With a combat meter, as long as you don't overexert yourself, when enemies are stunned just like they were in previous games, you can perform contextual melee moves that are even more creative than previous games. Since when was it logical for Leon to body slam zombies? But regardless, melee and close quarter combats play a much bigger role in this entry, and it's a lot of fun. And even if the game isn't as deliberately scary like the rest of the series, the adrenaline rush, the limited inventory, and the ability to die quickly makes this entry feel like a different kind of survival horror. It doesn't matter which campaign you're playing, a really annoying thing you'll be doing a lot of are Quicktime events. Sometimes it works, but using simple button prompts to drive a helicopter, for example, feels very out of place and forced. There are just too many Quicktime events. And sometimes I had to press a button or wiggle an analog stick so fast, I often felt like I was going to break my own controller. There are also some pretty terrible moments in the game, like the boss battle that takes place in Europe, or exploring underneath the cathedral. Moments like these consist of terrible level design, lack of creativity, and they're just plain boring. But there are just as many moments that are incredible, some of which are the greatest moments to be found in the series. A boss battle with an invisible snake, wandering through a city reminiscent of Resident Evil 2, and any moment that has you up against the Ustanok. In fact, the location, enemies, and objectives change all the time, to the point that the game rarely becomes stale, even during absolutely boring sections. You'll always be doing something different, and it shakes things up dramatically. This is an incredibly diverse game, even before you consider there are 7 different characters to play as that all have a few distinct abilities and weapons. And just like almost every other entry in the series, the enemies you face against are scary, creative, and varied. Without spoiling much, some of the monsters you fight later in the game are hands down the most creative enemies in the entire series. Like the 5th entry in the series, besides Ada's campaign, the entire game can be played with a buddy in co-op, both online and split screen. While it's totally playable and enjoyable to play by yourself, thanks to your AI never becoming a hassle, playing with a friend is a lot of fun because there are many moments that take full advantage of cooperative play. And like I said before about the campaigns intersected at certain moments throughout the story, you can actually intersect with other online players playing the exact same moment as you. Moments with up to 4 people playing the campaign are exciting, and they rarely feel like forced occasions. Even if the co-op takes away from the horror that could have been in the game instead, at least it's a lot of fun. All 4 campaigns contain 5 chapters each, and it'll take a good 25 hours to beat the game. Replay value consists of playing through the stories again as the other characters, shooting all the blue collectibles hidden throughout the levels, as well as trying out the multiple other game modes, such as the infamous Mercenaries mode. There's a lot of content to be found in this game, and with many different modes that even have you play as some of the affected enemies, there's something in this game for everyone. There are many moments in which Resident Evil 6 doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game. It doesn't contain any intimate moments of anticipation and barely any scares to be found, and even as an action game, it fails in some regards. But the story is big, the action is big, and so are the enemies. The characters are more entertaining than they've ever been, the different additions to the combat system change the way we approach enemies, and there are many moments that make this game one of the most memorable in the series. Once you get used to the way the game feels, you're gonna have a lot of fun with this game. Whether you're a huge fan of the series or not, take a whack at this game. With the ability to play split screen and the fact that it's not expensive, it shouldn't be hard to grab a buddy to play with. As long as you're not expecting a typical Resident Evil experience, you might like what you see here. Resident
Evil 6.
Resident Evil 6 receives an 8.25 out of 10. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this game. For future Resident Evil videos or anything video games, be sure to subscribe to BathroomGamers. Thank you for watching, and stay fresh.